The National Desk, America's News Now.
We want what we deserve, and we're tired. We're tired of giving up. We're tired of concessions. We're tired of acting like we don't matter. We matter.
Auto workers' strike expands across the country, but only for two of the big three, why Ford was left out. The coastal Carolinas now bracing for Ophelia as the 16th named storm in the Atlantic barrels towards the East Coast right now. The weekend impact and warning for millions.
They discovered approximately $500,000 of cash stuffed into envelopes and closets. Some of the cash was stuffed in the senator's jacket pockets.
Inside the new indictment of a sitting U.S. senator, the accusations and how his wife is tied to the case.
No crime, no work.
This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. We begin with breaking news. In the last hour, President Biden announced he will join the picket lines in Michigan this Tuesday in solidarity with the auto workers. It comes as thousands more union members walked off the assembly line. The UAW union strikes escalating a week after they first began, holding true to a promise to expand if serious progress wasn't made by noon today. Now, let's take a look at the latest. We had 38 plants impacted by this latest round of strikes. Of those 38, 13 additional plants, about 30% of the total, were in Michigan alone. But it's far more expansive this time around, more outside of Michigan. In fact, we had 20 states impacted in total, as you can see right here, everywhere from California to New York. And it's important to note these are all Stellantis and GM plants. Ford plants were strategically spared in this round. Fain saying this morning that Ford was the only company making headway in the talks.
But to be clear, we're not done at Ford. We still have serious issues to work through. But we do want to recognize that Ford is showing that they're serious about reaching a deal. At GM and Stellantis, it's a different story.
Still, today's closures will make a dent. 5,600 additional workers walking off the job today. That's on top of the already nearly 13,000 workers that walked off the job about a week ago. And let's turn now to Tropical Storm Ophelia. The storm forecasters have been watching all week, has officially formed and is set to drench much of the East Coast this weekend. You can take a look at this. You can see exactly where that system is expected to pack the biggest punch. North Carolina, that's where it's expected to begin. And then it heads into Virginia and the Delaware-Maryland border over the weekend. Almost 7 million people along the coast now under a tropical storm warning. Some places could see 3 to 4 feet of storm surge, creating coastal flooding conditions that could be life-threatening, along with winds strong enough to see downed trees and power outages. Stay with thenationaldesk.com as we continue to track Ophelia's progress. As a far cry from that, Seattle authorities are asking about 1.5 million residents there to conserve water amid an ongoing drought in most of the state of Washington. They were told yesterday to take shorter showers, only run full loads of laundry, stop watering their lawns, and repair leaks. Storms forecast for early next week could help. Seattle could even see its wettest day of the year on Monday. U.S. Senator from New Jersey, Bob Menendez, he has temporarily stepped down as chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and Governor Murphy now calling for him to resign. This comes as Menendez was indicted for a second time in his tenure as senator. Today, attorneys for the Southern District of New York charged him, his wife, and 3 New Jersey businessmen with 3 federal counts of bribery offenses. Prosecutors say a search of Senator Menendez's home turned up $100,000 in gold bars and $480,000 in hidden cash stuffed into envelopes and jacket pockets in Menendez's closet, among other gifts. They allege a pay-for-play scheme that gave power and influence to the businessmen and to aid members of the foreign government.
Among other actions, Senator Menendez allegedly provided sensitive, non-public U.S. government information to Egyptian officials and otherwise took steps to secretly aid the government of Egypt.
The senator says he has falsely been accused of accepting these bribes and will not be, quote, distracted from his work in the Senate. In 2018, you may remember the senator was found not guilty following a hung jury trial after being charged with accepting nearly $1 million of gifts and contributions from a Florida ophthalmologist. At this very moment, Eagle Pass, Texas is temporarily not seeing the high numbers of migrants crossing into the United States as we once did in the past few days. But the expectation is that a new surge will begin again as groups of thousands are now making their way through Central America and Mexico. Meanwhile, Texas state officials continue to battle the Biden administration and other states on how to best handle the numbers. Kayla Gaskins has the latest.
A deteriorating situation at the southern border. Levels of illegal migration approaching all-time records, on track to surpass them. The small community of Eagle Pass, Texas, with a population of 28,000, dealing with an influx of 5,000 illegal migrants the past few days alone. The town's Democratic mayor declaring a state of emergency.
You have all these thousands of people just walking in without any consequence whatsoever.
Blaming the federal government, saying Eagle Pass feels abandoned by Washington.
Anyone from the administration, please come visit Eagle Pass. At the very least, somebody up there in the White House needs to put out a statement giving us a plan.
The White House taking fire from reporters.
What do you call it when 10,000 people illegally cross the border in a single day?
On day one, the first day of this president's administration, he put forth a comprehensive immigration reform that we believe that was desperately needed for this country.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott declaring an invasion at our border, slamming Biden's policies. The White House and Texas playing tug of war. Federal Border Patrol agents seen cutting razor wire, allowing migrants in so they can be processed, apparently acting on orders from D.C. In response, the state installing even more wire.
Many people believe the answer to this crisis is New York City.
New York's leaders say the surge has maxed out their resources. Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul sounding very different this week.
We're at our limit. If you're going to leave your country, go somewhere else.
Than she did in 2021.
You're welcome with open arms, and we'll work to keep you safe. We'll not only house you, but we'll protect you.
President Biden deploying an additional 800 troops to the border to help process the migrants. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins.
Lawyers for former President Trump and his co-defendants in a fraud lawsuit were back in a New York Supreme Court today for a pretrial conference. Trump's attorneys want the judge to decide the case ahead of time, arguing there's a lack of evidence. But New York Attorney General Letitia James, she wants the judge to find Trump liable. The judge plans to decide by Tuesday. Meantime, the trial is set to start on October 2nd. High-speed train company Brightline didn't get off to a very bright start while launching its first ever Miami to Orlando service. The highly anticipated kickoff majorly delayed when a pedestrian was fatally struck by a separate Brightline train in Delray Beach, halting operations momentarily. Brightline, the first private inner-city passenger service, began back in 2018 with trips between Miami and West Palm Beach. And since then, 99 people have been killed in accidents, although the company has been cleared of fault in all so far. Today, House Rules Committee met to consider 4 spending bills to cover Department of Defense, Homeland Security, the State Department, and agriculture needs in hopes that the Senate will pass their own appropriations bills before the shutdown deadline next week. The U.S. House had adjourned yesterday without sending a comprehensive government spending bill to the Senate.
A shutdown is not unavoidable. In fact, our commitment needs to be to earnestly move forward on these appropriations bills.
Meanwhile, as the budget talks continue to keep government afloat, some small business owners and organizations are putting pressure on Congress to keep a Trump-era tax break in an effort to stay competitive with the larger industry. The National Desk's Angela Brown explains.
You may remember this moment back in 2017 when former President Donald Trump signed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. It included a tax break for small businesses.
The small business tax cut and the pass-throughs are now really incentivizing people.
The pass-through business deduction allows taxpayers to exclude up to 20% of their pass-through business income from federal income tax. Brad Close, president of the National Federation of Independent Businesses.
Being able to keep a few $1,000s extra in your business each year, maybe 5 or 10, allows you to do things that you couldn't otherwise, whether it's buying equipment, maybe giving that key employee a raise, maybe starting to think about creating a new job.
The pass-through deduction expires at the end of 2025. The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities says it should run out, calling the pass-through deduction tilted heavily to the wealthy and also costly, estimating extending it would cost over $700 billion over the decade that would follow. Brad Close argues it helps mom and pop shops.
We're talking about hairstylists, we're talking about laundromats, we're talking about a person running a 1 or a 2 bay car repair garage, a local farmer, truly small businesses.
There is some legislation out there, the Main Street Certainty Act, which is sponsored by a Republican and a Democrat, so it has bipartisan support, would make the small business deduction permanent. It's moving through Congress now. Reporting in Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
Angela, thank you. Coming up, mold and exposed sewage are just a few of the conditions some of our service members have to live with. Why this is happening at the nation's military barracks and what's being done to fix it. Then, what new data shows about the direction mortgage rates are heading in and how the numbers compare to last year. And former President Trump explains his position on the situation at the border and the war in Ukraine. We are back in 90 seconds. A new government watchdog report finds poor living conditions for some of our nation's service members. Among the issues are sewage overflows, mold, and more. National correspondent Janae Bowens has an in-depth look at the nation's military barracks.
America is the land of the free because of the brave, but the living conditions of some in the U.S. military fall short of what you'd expect for those who serve.
And I have to say, walking through some of those barracks, I was appalled.
A newly released Government Accountability Office investigation found several health and safety risks. We're talking mold, broken HVACs or none at all, inoperable fire systems, and even exposed sewage, like what you see here in this military training restroom, and unwanted pests captured in this room. The top Republican on the Senate Armed Services Committee, Roger Wicker, calls the findings shameful and troubling for the future of our force. In a statement, Assistant Defense Secretary Brendan Owens says, quote, "I commit to act. I will move out aggressively to increase oversight and accountability in government-owned unaccompanied housing and to address unacceptable living conditions impacting our service members." The housing issues come as the Pentagon faces major recruiting challenges. The Army, Navy, and Air Force all expecting to fall thousands short of their recruiting goals.
We heard from service members who we interviewed when we went to visit installations that they were telling their friends back home who were considering joining the military, don't do it because you're not going to be living in any conditions that you want to live in.
Now, this report is sure to be a hot topic at next week's congressional hearing on military housing. And Elizabeth Field, who you just heard from the GAO, will be one of the witnesses. Amira.
And Janae, what are some of the main things the GAO is recommending to improve these poor conditions?
Right, so the GAO has over 30 recommendations, including military departments obtain complete funding information and provide guidance on barracks condition assessments. Amira.
All right, Janae, as always, thank you for that reporting. A new investigation finds the military's F-35 fighter jets are mission capable only 55% of the time. The Government Accountability Office report was released yesterday, just a few days after an F-35B crashed in South Carolina. It made several recommendations to address ongoing maintenance issues. DoD agreed the changes are necessary. And mortgage rates in the U.S. edged up again this week, rising to 7.1% for a 30-year loan. These numbers are coming from Freddie Mac a year ago. At this time, the average mortgage rate was 6.29%. Today, the average rate for a 15-year mortgage also rose to 6.54%. That's over 1% higher than where we were a year ago. At the same time, existing home sales across the U.S. fell for the 5th straight month. August home sales fell 7% when compared to July and were down 15% when compared to August of last year. Well, Hollywood writers, they are getting a little bit closer to a deal with studios as talks continue for a third day, according to a person familiar with the negotiations. The source said the two sides made progress on some issues yesterday in discussions that lasted more than 10 hours. Members of the Writers Guild of America have been on strike since May. Many shows and movies have had to halt productions as a result. The striking actors and writers do appear to have broad support among the public right now. In an Associated Press poll, 55% of U.S. adults said they sympathize with the writers and actors. Just 3% said they sympathize with the studios, and half of Americans said they approve of the strikes. 40% said they're neutral, and just 9% said they disapprove. Ousted former Michigan State football coach Mel Tucker may have lied to investigators on multiple occasions. Newly released documents show major inconsistencies inside Tucker's previous statements regarding allegations of unwanted sexual comments made towards activist Brenda Tracy. Tucker is days away from being formally fired by the school and would lose roughly $80 million left in his contract. Tucker says ulterior motives are at play in his firing. Singer Lizzo is facing another lawsuit from a former employee. Wardrobe designer Asa Daniels filed a complaint yesterday accusing Lizzo of racial and sexual harassment, disability discrimination, assault, and bullying. It follows an August lawsuit from 3 other former employees. Lizzo's spokesperson said the lawsuit is a, quote, bogus publicity stunt. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter most to you. We're taking the pulse of America.
Pegasus, Tiana, Zaza, Red, all brand names referring to the dietary supplement known as tianeptine,
aka gas station heroin.
It's a fitting nickname. Experts say the highly addictive pills in many ways mirror the effects of heroin. Only these capsules are much more accessible, often found in gas stations, convenience stores, and smoke shops across Florida. Those at Florida's Poison Control Center tell us they've treated 65 patients overdosing on these drugs since 2020, 8 of which being from Palm Beach County. Now Attorney General Ashley Moody is looking to put a stop to it, filing an emergency rule to outlaw gas station heroin.
With today's action, we are adding tianeptine to Florida's Schedule I controlled substances list, which means it's a felony to buy, sell, or possess it.
It is a staggering number. Roughly 3.5 million U.S. veterans suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. Research has shown the love of a furry friend, a specially trained service dog, helps ease PTSD symptoms. Nicole Lanahan is the executive director of Got Your Six Support Dogs. Because of the time and cost to train these dogs, Lanahan says only about 1% of U.S. veterans who need a dog get one. The Service Dog Salute program is raising money to help train more PTSD service dogs. Right now, you can vote on the Visible Impact Award winner. There are 5 finalists. For every vote, Dog Chow will donate $5 up to $75,000 to the Association of Service Dog Providers for Military Veterans to help train more service dogs.
The defendants intentionally used an imaging device to secretly view or record the victims for their own amusement or sexual arousal.
They were charged with something that they didn't do.
The only verdict consistent with the evidence, or in this case, the lack of evidence, is a verdict of not guilty.
2 Florida men have been acquitted of video voyeurism. They were accused of watching a woman alone getting dressed and with her husband. File logs showed the men logged on hundreds of times at night and on weekends. The men are still facing a civil lawsuit. Well, coming up, former President Trump explains his stance on the situation at the border and also the war in Ukraine. We'll be right back. This week, a national emergency was declared at one Texas border crossing as thousands of illegal migrants crossed into the United States. Texas Governor Greg Abbott, he called out the National Guard and the Department of Defense sent hundreds of active duty soldiers to the area. This week, Full Measure's Cheryl Atkinson sat down for an interview with former President Donald Trump, and the border was among the topics they discussed.
On the border, millions of people have come in since you left office illegally.
It's very sad.
I did a report in 2018 based on General Accountability Office and FBI figures that said the illegal immigrant population was about 1 in 30 Americans, or people in the United States at the time, but accounted for at least 1 in 5 prison inmates at great expense. I understand moving forward you would plan to reinstall some of the border controls that you had if you were elected again.
All of them.
But how do we deal with, or do we deal with, the millions that have come in since? Do we just let that go, or is there a practical way to deal with it?
No country can sustain what we're sustaining right now. No country's rich enough.
So how do you deal with those, or do you deal with those
You have to get them out.
here?
You have to deport.
How?
You have to deport. You know who did it? You know who did
Do you have
it?
a mass program to
You have
identify them?
You have to have a mass deportation program. That's right. And you know what? When you say that, everyone's going to stop coming. You know, one of the reasons I was successful is they knew it was going to be very, very hard to come in. We moved out, as you know, thousands of people, thousands of gang members, thousands and thousands. I mean, these are rough people. These are people that are as rough as you get. These are real serious criminals. We took them out by the thousands, and we're going to have to do that again.
So the U.S. had committed more than $43 billion in security assistance, such as weapons and munitions, to Ukraine.
Yeah.
Congress approved $113 billion. President Biden approved or is asking for $24 billion more. A CNN poll found a majority of Americans, 55%, say Congress should not authorize more funds for Ukraine. Where do you stand on the money issue for Ukraine?
Well, I stand on a very simple issue. I want that war stopped. That war would never have started. Putin would have never done it with me as president. I want the death to stop. It should have never started. It would have never, ever started. As sure as you're sitting there, it would have never started. And I would speak to Putin about that a lot. It was the apple of his eye. There was no question about it. I said, you're not going to do it, because if you do it, the consequences, and I told him what the consequences were. And he said, you would never do that. I said, oh, you better not try me. I will do it. And he probably didn't believe me, but he believed me 10%. And he wouldn't have done it. But, you know, he wouldn't have done it for another reason. I had oil at $40 a barrel. He wouldn't have been able to afford it. When oil went up to $115, and now it's going to be close to $100 right now again. Here we go again. The gasoline's $5 a gallon. Here we go. He makes so much money. It's for prosecuting a war. You know, usually a war, a lot of bad things happen, but you also lose a lot of money. He's making a fortune. I would have never had the oil above $40 a barrel. And if it's not above $40 a barrel, he can't afford the war.
Mr. President, thank you.
Thank you very much.
A new episode of Full Measure with Cheryl Atkinson airs this Sunday. Check your local listings for the times on that. Also, don't miss the Full Measure After Hours podcast, available wherever you download your favorite podcasts. Latest streaming platform to announce it is putting ads in its content and how much you'll have to pay to skip them. Stay with us. Well, you may have cut your cable cord, but the ads follow you anyway, don't they? Amazon's Prime Video is the next streaming platform putting ads into its programming. The company says starting next year, shows and movies on Prime will include limited advertisements. It's unclear how long the ad breaks will be, but if you want to skip them, you'll have to pay an extra $2.99 per month. A yearly subscription to Prime Video is $139. Netflix, you may remember, rolled out a similar ad-based program last year. And that does it for this edition of the National Desk. We do invite you to join us again this evening for more coverage on America's top stories. Just check your local listings for the times. I'm Amira David. Thank you so much for watching.